Assalamu alaikum and welcome to The Report. I'm Yasmin Khatun and I'll be taking a look at the stories that matter to you. We will be discussing news stories from throughout the week and the ones that you've all been talking about. On The Report, we do love to hear what you think, so to join the conversation, get tweeting using hashtag The Report. Later on in the programme, we'll be going through the topics that have been trending throughout the week. But before we get into the conversation, let's have a look at some of the week's news.
United Nations human rights investigators have said the Syrian government is using what they call enforced disappearances as part of a campaign of terror against civilians. The report says thousands of people have been disappeared, with many never seen again. This comes as a British surgeon, arrested by the Syrian government last November, died earlier this week whilst being held in a state prison. His family had been told he would be released this week.
The fact remains that he went to Syria to help the people of Syria who were affected by the civil war. There is no excuse whatsoever for the treatment that he has suffered by the Syrian authorities, who have in effect murdered a British national.
Abbas Khan, an orthopaedic surgeon from South London, went to Syria to offer his services in rebel-held Aleppo. In letters written to British Foreign Secretary William Hague, Khan said he had been tortured whilst in detention and kept in isolated, squalid conditions. A second Briton was also reported to have been killed in Syria this week. 23-year-old Iftikhar Jarman left Britain to join a rebel group opposed to President Bashar al-Assad. The Foreign Office has said that its options for supporting Britons in Syria were extremely limited. Egypt's public prosecutor has ordered ousted President Mohamed Morsi and 34 other Muslim Brotherhood leaders to stand trial on charges including conspiring with foreign groups to commit terrorist acts. In a statement, the prosecutor said that the Muslim Brotherhood had committed acts of violence and terrorism in Egypt and had prepared a terrorist plan. The charges levelled against Egypt's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, could result in his execution. Morsi is already standing trial for inciting violence during protests outside the presidential palace a year ago, whilst he was still in office. He was deposed in July by the Egyptian armed forces. Egyptian authorities have launched a brutal crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood since Morsi was removed from power, killing hundreds of his supporters during protests and arresting thousands more. Demonstrations have continued this week after the execution of Jamaat-e-Islam leader Abdul Mullah last week. Jamaat-e-Islam is the biggest Islamic party in Bangladesh and is allied with the main opposition party. The 18-party opposition alliances have been calling demonstrations throughout the week. Following criticism from Pakistan for the execution, around 100 protesters gathered near Pakistan's High Commission in Dhaka, threatening to besiege it if Bangladesh did not suspend its diplomatic ties with the country within 20 hours. Pakistan passed a resolution on Monday denouncing Bangladesh's execution of Mullah, who was convicted of committing war crimes during the 1971 War of Independence with Pakistan. Several protesters have been injured in scuffles with riot police in the Bangladeshi capital. Local media have said several of the injured protesters were members of the Gonajarong Manch group, known for leading a youth movement for trying suspected war criminals. Police cordoned off the activists and used batons to disperse a sit-in near the High Commission. 6 protesters have been arrested. The Gonajarong Manch came into existence after Mullah received a life sentence for committing war crimes, which some felt was too lenient. The ruling was later revised to a death penalty by Bangladesh's Supreme Court, resulting in the leader's execution. Michael Abdullah and Michael Abdullah were found guilty of murder on Thursday after killing drummer Lee Rigby in broad daylight in Woolwich earlier this year. A jury at London's Old Bailey Criminal Court took just over 90 minutes to unanimously find the pair guilty. The 2 men were found not guilty of the attempted murder of a police officer. During the trial, the pair never denied killing Rigby, but Adebolajo argued the act should not be considered murder, but as an act of war, a war in response to Britain's foreign policy and Western wars in countries such as Iraq and Afghanistan. The Crown Prosecution Service has said it will ask the court to find that the murder was motivated by terrorism when the defendants come to be sentenced in January. British Prime Minister David Cameron has described Rigby's killing as an act of terrorism and a betrayal of Islam.
Well, the whole country was completely shocked by the murder of Lee Rigby, and the whole country united in condemnation of what happened, and I'm sure everyone will welcome these verdicts today. I think it also shows that we have to redouble our efforts to confront the poisonous narrative of extremism and violence that lay behind this, and make sure that we do everything to beat it in our country.
The verdict comes just weeks on from a report released by the British government which aims to counter extremism in Britain. Francis Legg, reporting for Islam Channel.
Now, with me to discuss some of those stories are Zeshaan Ali, a community fundraising manager for Islamic Relief, and Imam Abdullah Hasan. Now, if I can come to you, Zeshaan, first. Syria, we've seen kidnappings, violence, escalated violence in the country. Somebody who's been to Syria this year. Can you tell me what the situation's like?
Well, it's absolutely harrowing. It's horrendous out there. You just have to pretty much envisage it as, or see it as, millions of people living in camps who have nothing, who've lost everything they worked for, everything they knew is now pretty much in the cities. They are now in camps. You're talking about, it's winter now, lots of people are hungry, destitute, they need help, they need water as well. And then now with the winter, all they have is really a thin sheet of plastic to keep out the cold. So it is absolutely horrendous. And to be honest, people like us, it's very difficult for us to be able to imagine without being there what it is like.
Well, this is the thing, in terms of aid sort of getting in, I know we heard lots from the US and the UK last week in terms of restricting aid because it was going into the wrong hands. And then for aid workers going into the country, what is safety like there?
There is no UN resolution, which technically means there's no UN within the country operating, no one controlling the camps. Security, there is always a risk. Our staff go in, our staff working there knowing there is a risk. However, on the flip side, our staff are vigilant. They're local Syrians, they work with the local community, they regularly keep on update with the security updates, and to ensure that when we are delivering aid, we are doing it low-key and ensuring that we're just getting the job done. And obviously security is a priority for us.
Imam Abdullah Hasan, we've got aid agencies such as Islamic Relief and others working in Syria, but for the Muslim community here in Britain, what else should they be doing for the Syrians abroad?
I think, first and foremost, from an Islamic perspective, we need to obviously make dua, supplicate for our brothers and sisters in Syria who are being affected greatly in this massacre and the government is carrying out. Secondly, if we are able to financially help Islamic Relief, for example, and other charities who are working in the ground to provide much needed assistance and aid, food, shelter, clothes, especially during the winter time, shoes. I've been reading news stories that young children are walking on the snow without any shoes and slippers. So if we are able to financially aid Islamic Relief and other charities who are working on the ground, I think it's an Islamic duty, so it's a must. Within our capacity, within our ability, we have to help. And also thirdly, try and, if we have the capacity and ability, try and lobby our government, local MPs, to try and see what they can do to put pressure on the international community and also the Syrian government to stop what they're doing.
Okay, we're talking about the government and what they can be doing. The government, we've just seen there in that report where the British government has said they cannot ensure safety for Britons going out there. Just this week we saw the loss of a British medic out there, a surgeon, Abbas Khan. What can we be saying to aid workers who are taking that step further, going out there, when the British government cannot actually ensure your safety?
Well, we as Islamic Relief, firstly, deepest condolences to Dr. Abbas's family. But we as Islamic Relief, we use local staff and local knowledge. We don't take people from here, take them into such circumstances because it's dangerous. So that's why we advise leaving it to the locals and let them get on with the work and deliver the aid.
Okay, we'll bring in another news story. We saw there Bangladesh, where again we've seen protests, violence throughout this week. Last week there was an execution last week, and as a reaction from Pakistan, we saw the Gonajogoron Manch, who actually came out in protest after the life sentence was given to the individual who was executed last week. We saw them come out again to ask for Bangladesh to halt relations with Pakistan. Imam Abdullah, Hasan, I know you've been following Bangladesh. Can you give me your thoughts on some of this?
I think obviously the execution that took place last week unjustly was a criminal act by the Bangladeshi government. It's a political act really because of the election, supposed election coming up in January. And
but these people in Bangladesh have come out to say, yes, we wanted this execution to take place. It's taken place, and why is the international community, why are people in Pakistan protesting, or why are political figures there commentating on something which they also played a part in?
It's because the trials that took place